Our business agility framework gives us 5 steps to follow that help us to ensure mastery and success with business agility. The first of these steps is becoming aware that change itself is critical, and it starts with believing is seeing, and seeing is the key in the first step. Seeing allows us to become more aware and deepen our sensitivity to not only the world around us, but the conditions that are influencing continuous change. When we deepen our awareness in the seeing phase, it enables us to explore what some of the options are that we should consider in framing up new experiments. So the first step is seeing. Second step is exploring options. We call it discovery or exploration. Many of us jump to solve the first solution we come up with, and that's usually not the best solution. So exploring is step 2 in the framework, and it enables us to spend just enough time looking at alternatives. Usually the first idea we come up with is not the best. Usually it allows us to leverage the benefits of the wisdom of the crowd as well and learn from each other. The third step in our business agility iterative framework is experimenting. In today's very complex and volatile world, we need to tame the uncertainty in our environment. And the best way to do that is through seeing everything as an experiment. If we do that and we formulate hypotheses with rigorous tests so that we will know clearly whether our experiment succeeds or fails, we set ourselves up for success in actually cutting through the uncertainty and taming the complexity in the world around us. The reason why we want to get to this third step as quickly as possible is that we actually learn by doing, not by thinking. So we want to jump quickly into experimentation and fearlessly, knowing that we cannot fail. Because even if our experiments fail, we learn more than if we'd spent too much time in just thinking about things. The fourth step in our iterative framework is actually learning. It's only through learning that we advance our knowledge and we advance towards mastery and business agility. So learning is a critical key of understanding what the outcomes of our experiment has been and learning from those. By learning, we mean generating new knowledge, not just taking notes or sharing ideas in a retrospective, all very important, but we learn basically by forming new neural networks. And that learning allows us to retrieve that learning on demand when we need it in the uncertainty of the future. The last step in the iterative framework is teaching. Teaching actually amplifies different neural networks and anchors what we've learned so that we can retrieve that learning on demand when we need it, when an uncertain challenge faces us in the future. Now, the reason we call this an iterative framework is because we go through from teaching back to seeing again. But when we go through this spiral framework or iteratively, we now see things at a much deeper level, having gone through the entire 5-step process once. As we iterate on this over and over again, we ascend towards our path to mastery, because each time we have a new mindset and we see things at a deeper level, things that we would have missed the first go round. This is how we actually learn to master business agility. There are preconditions to set us up for success with business agility. The first and foremost is operating with a new mindset, or truly embracing a growth mindset, as opposed to the fixed mindset that most of us have acquired throughout our education and our careers. So what's that mean exactly? A growth mindset in a business environment is critical to truly effective change, and it forces us to give up some of the preconditions that we're thinking of as, for example, with a fixed mindset, we oftentimes fall into the trap of thinking about being able to accurately deliver estimates for unknown unknowns. Instead, because of that, we form and prioritize our planning and planfulness. In addition to our planning skills, we need to kind of amplify those with sense-making skills and deepening our awareness to pay attention to things that we might not normally be seeing. So a growth mindset In a growth mindset, what you will see in an organization that practices that is a deep belief in our full potential and our team's full potential. So you will see environments that practice organizational growth mindset, where there is no blame, there's no finger pointing, no justification, no excuses. We deliver to our commitments wholly, and we don't necessarily spend any time at all judging or blaming or finger pointing or wasting times in those types of behaviors. Instead, if we truly believe in every individual member of our teams and our organization's full potential, we set up an environment so they can deliver to their full potential, but we hold them accountable for that as well. This one characteristic and precondition of business agility is the single most important condition for success. Organizations that do not do the effort of building an organizational growth mindset, starting with each individual, will not succeed in their path to mastery in terms of future business agility. The second most important precondition towards success is making the invisible visible, and that starts by making value visible. We all talk about value, we all say value is important, but oftentimes we don't do the extra effort of really learning how to normalize value and actually make it visible. So this is a critical new skill and a critical precondition that we need to go through to do the development of a business agility model, an enterprise-wide value model that gives everyone in the organization a clear line of sight to how he or she creates value in their everyday work. It's important first to look at the business drivers that we want to focus on in the near horizon for our strategic business success, and translate those drivers into value dials in which we weight and prioritize and articulate value so that everyone in the organization can make decisions at the lowest level based on value-based decisions. Value then gives us a tool to actually accelerate our learning. So making value visible is the second most important precondition for setting us up for success in business agility. The third precondition is recognizing that in the extreme uncertainty in today's business environment, we need to understand that everything is an experiment because there are unknown unknowns that we can't possibly be aware of as we start. So if we treat everything like an experiment, and I mean everything, every project, every story, every budget, every estimate is actually an experiment. Once we adopt this mindset of really seeing everything as an experiment, it enables us to actually fearlessly pursue that experiment. Because the cool thing about experiments, if we remember from our days in science class, is that you cannot fail. Even if an experiment fails, you'll discover more new information than if it succeeds. So it's actually enables us to approach and learn very quickly by jumping into running the experiment and discovering from the experiment whether we've created whole new knowledge or whether we've actually just validated knowledge that we assumed to be true when we formulated our hypothesis. If we fail the experiment, we actually generate new knowledge, which is even more beneficial than if our experiment succeeds. But we do look at everything as an experiment, and we try to run those experiments as lean, minimum viable experiments. Lean systems thinking is also an important precondition, and that is being able to not only see the reality of the situation, but be able to zoom out and see it a little broader, see the big picture, then zoom in and focus on the areas that we want to run a particular experiment on. So it's that zooming out and zooming in to be able to look at the full picture and yet focus in on the one or two areas that need more experimentation that enable us to operate successfully in the complexity of today's world and to be able to run experiments and not lose sight of how they fit in the holistic value stream of the organization. One thing's certain, all of us have too much to do, and we don't have time sometimes even to think nevertheless innovate. So it's important for each one of us to take accountability and responsibility for assessing the work that we're doing that creates real value than the work that doesn't create value or creates marginal value. Some of the work that we do may surprise us and find out that it creates negative value. So by us taking responsibility for creating the time and the space, and even more importantly, the energy for innovation, is a very, very important precondition for business agility as well. Each of us owning the fact that we own our own space. We own how we spend our own time, and we need to carve out time to think, to reflect, and most importantly, to innovate. Many people think that innovation happens in a rarefied innovation lab, but quite honestly, we need to innovate at every level. We need to innovate continuously in our teams, in our own work. Stop, reflect, learn, and innovate. So it's important for us to take ownership of that and actually create the time and the space for innovation. In addition, we need to create the space and the time for continuous learning. By continuous learning, learning is how, as adults, learning is how we actually develop mastery in business agility, and learning on the job is most critical. We're probably all familiar with the 70-20-10 theories of learning, that we learn most by doing, we learn most on the job. So giving ourselves time to reflect and to learn and to think on the job is absolutely critical. Deep learning doesn't really happen in a classroom setting. Deep learning happens continuously on the job, where we're helping each other form new ideas and new neural networks and share that learning. So it's equally important to create time and space for learning as it is for innovation. In today's rapidly changing world, as we're advancing on our path towards business agility, we might ask ourselves, how do we know we're learning? How do we know we're succeeding and getting better and better? It's very critical that we put in feedback loops, because feedback loops are the only way we know whether we're getting better or whether we're kind of stagnating or whether we're actually declining. So the three feedback loops that are absolutely vital is that we check in with ourselves and our teams every single day, or at least every single week, the more frequently the better, to have these accelerated feedback loops in place. And we ask ourselves three basic questions. How are we doing relative to the commitments that we've made to achieve during this learning iteration? Are we achieving our successful targets, or are we slipping? And if we're slipping, what are we going to do about that right now, today, not at the end of the iteration or not at the next status report? Daily check-ins are absolutely critical. The second piece of feedback that we're looking at is, are we getting better and better? As we've mentioned throughout this video, learning is the key to business agility. If we're not learning, and if we're not demonstrating that learning by getting better and better, then we're actually not accelerating our path towards business agility. So we check in to say, how are we doing to our commitments, and are we getting better and better at delivering those commitments and building our capacity and capability to do so? And then the third measure is, are we still going in the right direction? The dynamics of business change so rapidly that possibly the project that we started several weeks or months ago might have changed. And it may be important to reflect on, is that still the successful target that we're seeking? Or should we realign our target on some new business market trend or some new initiative that will create even more value to our customer? So those three check-ins and the feedback loops are vitally important. In terms of the true measures of success at the end, how will we know we will have succeeded as business agilists? Are pretty simple but very hard to achieve. One is, are we truly delighting our teams? Do our team members thrive in the current work environment? Are they each achieving their full potential and can't wait to come to work and can't wait to contribute, make contributions to not only themselves and their acceleration, but the customers? Are they then truly delighting the customers? Delight is a meaningful word in this sense, because it's hard enough to actually achieve our commitments to our customers, but if we are delighting the customers by giving them exactly what they need in the shortest amount of time possible, then we know that we're successful and we're doing really well on our path towards business agility. So how might our business agility framework, that 5-step process, really serve us in terms of a typical day at work or a typical project? Again, starting with believing and then seeing, an example might be many of us fall into the trap of becoming order takers to what our customers are telling us that they want. So rather than writing down hundreds or many requirements and becoming order takers of the customer, we actually want to become value shapers and form a trusted relationship with our internal product owner or our internal proxy for the customer. An example of that might be seeing things through the eyes of experiencing them as the customer might. So tools that we might use to enhance our seeing and deepen our awareness might be the customer value proposition. So at the beginning of every project or at the beginning of every story that we might be delivering or service that we might be delivering to our customer, we don't presume that we know what it feels like to be that customer or what the customer really needs. We certainly don't go out and simply ask the customer, "Tell me what you need." We actually go through the process of putting on our empathy hats and thinking about a customer and giving that customer an identity, giving that customer a name, a persona, kind of walking through a day in the life of our customer, giving them a name, giving them a persona, and then doing a value model canvas where we walk through and say, what's it feel like to be that customer? Doing an empathy map. What's a day in the life of that customer really feel like? What's most important to that customer? What do they really need in the context of the service that we're going to be providing? What do they want? What are they asking for? We focus more on what they want and what they deeply need. By going through this process as a team and really creating an identity and making our customer become real is an example of seeing. We see that customer's life and their needs through a whole new lens, not presuming that we know or having done a very narrow view of doing a sampling of certain customer focus groups. We also go through the process of really feeling what it feels like to be a customer. That's an example of seeing. We might exemplify that by doing a customer journey map and think about what the customer's journey to us has been in terms of developing the product or the service that we're working on, and where the customer will be going with what we provide. In doing this and putting this big visible empathy map and customer value proposition visibly on the wall, we enable everyone on the team to stay focused on what's most important for that customer. So that's an example of applying the seeing piece of the framework to the customer. Another way of applying seeing, another seeing tool that we use are A3s, Gemba walks, some lean agile tools where we actually get out of the office and experience the life of a customer by watching those customers in the store or in a service provisioning sense. So we get a sense of seeing the customer's life in action. That's an example of how we might apply the seeing piece of the framework to go through that extra effort of deepening our awareness of what the customer really needs before we just get busy delivering what they think they need, what they don't really need. How do we make value visible? That seems to be the hardest part for some of us. One of the things we can use is the Agile Triangle from Jim Highsmith. That is, we are all familiar with the triple constraint or scope, schedule, and budget that has been challenging us throughout our careers. We amplify the Agile Triangle by placing that triple constraint on just one of the hypotenuses of the triangle and actually balance constraints with quality, but focus entirely on making value visible, which is the real essence of business agility and the real essence of business today in terms of giving our customers, delighting our customers, and giving our organization a competitive edge. So the Agile Triangle helps us to recognize that constraints are how we manage value, but actually value should be our primary focus. One of our most powerful tools for tracking value is once we've assigned a normalized scoring technique through our enterprise value model and enterprise value engineering, we actually track value delivered on a value curve. So a value curve enables us to recognize that we have moved the highest value stories in our backlog, or the highest value work that we're considering doing, forward into the value chain. We move in agility, we move the highest value work or the most complex work forward into starting that work first, so we minimize surprises at the end of the value chain and the value cycle. So a value curve would ensure that we'd see a very steep acceleration in the curve itself as we're crossing the boundaries of time and value. So if we're seeing this steep value curve, where we're seeing that in the very shortest amount of time, we've delivered the highest amount of value to our customers, and continue to see this steepening of the curve, that shows us a very healthy value curve. Time over value, and time again is associated with cost. When the curve starts to flatten, we're seeing that possibly we've delivered already the highest value work, and we're reaching a place where we might consider killing the project or reinvesting the remaining cost or budget for that project in newer work that has emerged since we started this project. So we kind of read those value curves to help us accelerate our delivery of the highest value and delight the customer, and suspend the work that's remaining that's only marginal value work or minimum value work in service to the higher value that's coming in, as our customers, as we know, are never short of ideas for new value creation. So the value curve is one of our most powerful tools to ensure that we're learning continuously and reducing the cost of value and the time to value. It's a learning tool and a value acceleration tool. We can't think ourselves into a new way of acting. We actually have to act ourselves into a new way of thinking. So in business agility, we're biased towards action, quick to learn by doing. That's one of the major premises of learning in business agility. The reason for that, again, is by doing, we actually learn as adults. So we work very hard at not overanalyzing or overthinking things, but do just enough for now, good enough for now. Perfection is actually our enemy in the future and the current world of very fast-paced business change and acceleration and just ambiguity, which is a world that we find ourselves surrounded in. So the more confident we are and the more fearlessly we move into action, knowing that we might fail and knowing that even if we fail, we're going to learn more by doing than if we hold back until we feel comfortable. Stretching ourselves out of our comfort zone is one of the key self-enablers that we can work on. Always stretching ourselves and acting, making decisions before we have quite enough information, balancing, of course, the real risk, but pushing ourselves kind of beyond our comfort zone and disrupting ourselves into being comfortable with the discomfort of that is a key to our future success in business agility. So the faster we iterate through our iterative business agility framework, the more comfortable we are with stretching outside of our comfort zones, the more successful we'll be in learning and in growing and in being agile.